Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We've got another chunk of Zach's Lie here. Let's see what's going to happen today. So, last time when we left off, Peter Short has found Zach's journal. The postcard has been discovered by Alonzo and his team, and we have a Hector Jones that has made it to Elko, and he's asking Daryl some interesting questions. Is Hector with Alonzo? Let's find out. Also, Wanda is about to sing her audition for the school play. So, if we go back just a little bit, the first Christine finished her song to a loud applause. Crouched behind the seat, Zach and Daryl could not see the stage. After a while, things quieted down and the music started again. Wanda's voice literally filled the auditorium from her very first note. The man with the ponytail leaned forward in the seat. Wow, Daryl whispered. Zach nodded in agreement. He had heard Wanda sing the song a dozen times around the house, but hadn't heard it sound anything like this. If he didn't know better, he could swear there was a Broadway star singing on the stage. A man in the black got up and left the back balcony before Wanda finished the song. Zach and Daryl got back into their seats just in time to see Wanda hit her last note. Zach had never been more proud of his sister. When the song ended, there was no applause. At first. Wanda stood on the stage with her head bowed, almost as if she were praying. Zach wondered what she was thinking about at that moment. The Phantom stood a few feet away just looking at her as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. Someone began clapping and was joined by others. When everyone got up and gave Wanda a standing ovation. In his excitement over his sister's performance, Zach forgot about the man in black until he and Daryl were standing in front of his house. What do you think that guy was doing in the balcony? Never seen him before, Daryl said. Probably a parent, though, snuck in for a look like we did. I guess we didn't have to hide if he told on us. He would get busted, too. They don't let parents into the auditions. He left before Wanda finished, which seemed very odd to Zach. He was probably the first girl's father, Daryl said. As soon as he heard your sister, he knew it was all over for his daughter. See you tomorrow. Daryl continued down the block to his house. Zach's mother was in her bedroom packing for a trip. I've got good news, she said. Mr. Sebasta would be delighted to have you as his guest. Sam had already told him. Thanks for letting me stay, Mom. And, she continued, I asked him about this so-called scuffle you had at school. Uh-oh, Zach thought. Seems the other boy got a black eye out of the deal. Mr. Sebasta said it wasn't your fault, but... At that moment, Wanda burst into the house, announcing she had gotten the part of Christine. I flubbed the song a little, but they gave it to me anyway. Wanda hadn't flubbed a note, as far as Zach could tell, but he couldn't say anything because he wasn't supposed to have been there. That's wonderful, Zach's mom said. I'm so proud of you. She gave Wanda a hug. Zach wanted to talk to Wanda about Commander If, but he wasn't able to get her alone. She spent the whole evening with their mother, packing and talking about the play, the bookstore, and what they would do in Los Angeles. Zach finally gave up and went to bed, hoping to catch her alone before they went to the airport. Around 2 a.m, Zach was awakened by a light tapping on his door. He turned the light on. Yeah? Wanda came into his room, closing the door quietly behind her, and sat on the edge of the bed. It looked like she had been crying. What's the matter? I can't sleep, she said. I've been thinking about Dad. Oh. It really hit me today during the audition. To bring the right emotion to the song, I tried to think of the saddest thing I could. I thought about how Dad used to be and what's happening to him now. Oh, Jack. She threw her arms around him and started to cry. He held her, and for a moment they were Jack and Joanne Osborne again. Chapter 19. Here's the number of our hotel, Zach's mother said. Are you sure you'll be all right? Yes, Mom. We'll be home early Sunday evening. Do you know when you'll be down from the mountains? Late, probably. Not too late. You have school on Monday. I gotta go. Zach kissed his mother and was tempted to kiss his sister as well. He felt a lot closer to her than he had in a long time. He hadn't talked about Commander If. It would have to wait until after she got back from Los Angeles. He gave her a big smile and said, Don't let some Hollywood producer lure you away. Not a chance. Zach wasn't so sure after hearing her performance. He got to Caitlin's house just as she was stepping out of her front door. Zach, I understand you'll be staying with us at the Nevada tonight, Mrs. Christabel said. I hope that's all right, Zach said. Of course it's all right. We enjoy your company. The school day started out well. Mr. Dugan was home with the flu. The substitute thought PE meant pretty easy, and for the first time since Zach started school, he walked into his homeroom sweat-free. This changed as soon as he took a seat. Scrawled across the chalkboard in very big, clumsy letters was, if you take the V out of lives, what do you get? I don't think this is funny at all, Mrs. Miller said. It took me half an hour to get the red chalk off the board yesterday. I want to know who did this. Zach stared straight ahead, unable to believe what he was seeing. His sister had not told a friend about Commander If. Someone read about Commander If in his journal. Well, Miss Miller asked. No one answered. Fine. She stepped over the intercom and called the principal. It took Miss Pyle less than a minute to get to the room. She looked at the scrawled sentence for a long time, then turned to the class. Someone in here knows something about this, Miss Pyle said, and looked from student to student, lingering a little longer when she got to Zach, who was frantically trying to remember the last time he had seen his journal. The leather backpack was hanging on the doorknob of his bedroom door. This he knew. He had seen it just that morning and had almost slipped the pack over his shoulder on his way out, but decided he would pick it up after school instead. But was the journal in the backpack? When was the last time he had seen the journal? Today was the 13th of October. Friday the 13th. That's just about perfect, he thought bitterly. He had made his last entry on Saturday while he was working in the building. He remembered that he was getting to the end of the journal and decided to cut back on the entries until he found a replacement for it. Zach? If he lost the journal or someone had stolen it, Zachary? His mother would have to give up her bookstore. His sister would lose the part in her opera ghost. He would lose Caitlin. It seemed impossible that he had been the one who had slipped. Zachary Granger! His hand slammed down on his desk. The classroom came back into focus. Mrs. Pyle had somehow materialized in front of his desk and was looking down at him in a horrible scowl. She pointed at the board. What do you know about this, Zach? Nothing, he said quietly. What? I said I don't know anything about it. What time did you arrive at school today? Just before the bell. I didn't do this. Caitlin came to his defense. He's right, Mrs. Pyle. Zach and I walked to school together this morning. We got here just before the bell rang. Mrs. Pyle stared at Zach. What did you do yesterday after school? I was with Daryl. Mrs. Pyle looked over at Daryl. And what did you do after school? We played video games in my house, Daryl said with a perfectly straight face. I annihilated him. Several kids laughed. It occurred to Zach that Daryl was much better suited for the witness security program than he was. Mrs. Pyle addressed the entire class. If this happens again, you will all stay after school and scrub every chalkboard in this building. Before she left the room, she shot Zach another scowl. Scrubbing chalkboards was the least of Zach's problems. He had to get home and find out if his journal was still in the backpack, but he'd have to wait until lunch. He couldn't leave early without getting a pass from the office, which would mean another encounter with Mrs. Pyle. He glanced at the clock every 3 minutes, thinking that at least half an hour had passed. When the bell finally rang, it was all he could do not to sprint out of the room at a dead run. He followed the others through the door. Caitlin was waiting for him in the hallway. Why do you think Mrs. Pyle thought you wrote on the board? I don't know, Zach said. Are you okay? You look kind of strange when Mrs. Pyle was talking to you. I just zoned out for a second or two. Daryl walked up to them. You two headed to lunch? I've got to run home for a second, Zach answered. Why? Caitlin asked. I left my homework. Aren't you going to eat? I'll get something at home, Zach said, backing away down the hall. I'll see you after lunch. As soon as he got out of sight of the school, he ran all the way home. He found his backpack hanging on the closet doorknob. He dumped the contents on the bed. Commander If, pencils, erasers, 2 books he was reading. No journal. He sat on the edge of the bed and covered his face with his hands. He thought about his laundry hamper and jumped up. It wouldn't be the first time he had hidden the journal in there. He turned it over and shook it out. Socks, underwear, shirts, pants. No journal. Zach cursed. The only other place it might be was in the Jack-in-the-Box. There was a chance he might have put it in there and forgotten he had done it. He put the box down from the closet shelf without much hope and put it on the bed. 5 journals, Zach said aloud. That's all I ask. If there are 5 in the box, I promise I will never slip up again. In fact, I'll burn them and forget Jack Osborne ever existed. Zach pulled the chain with the Jack-in-the-Box key over his head. He opened the padlock, closed his eyes, lifted the lid, then turned the box upside down. He opened his eyes. There were 5 journals laying on the bed, but one wasn't his. The fifth journal was scuffed and battered and had a rubber band around it to hold the pages in. He took the rubber band off and opened the cover. Paper-clipped to the first page was a note from his father. Jacko, I'm sorry I had to use your box. I didn't know where else to put this thing. I'm also sorry you found this before I was ready. Whatever you do, don't read this journal. The information it contains will get you into trouble. Above all else, keep the journal safe. I'll get in touch with you when I need it. Love, Dad. Zach reread the note 3 times. The binding on the journal had come apart and all the pages inside were loose. On the first page was a sketch of a man's face. Beneath the sketch was a name, Alonzo Asnar. Under the name were Alonzo Asnar's vital statistics: age, height, weight, hair color, eye color, and various addresses. Despite his father's warning, Zach flipped through a few more pages. On them were a few more sketches, locations of remote landing strips, addresses, and rows of accounting information, all in his father's neat handwriting. Zach slipped the rubber band back around the journal. He looked at the other journals lying on the bed. There was no point in burning them now. Number 5 was gone. Someone knew who they were. It was only a matter of time before the Grangers became someone else. What rhymes with Zach? He asked. Mac, Commander If said. Zach called the number of the hotel his mother had given him. I'm sorry, the receptionist said. We don't have anyone here by the name of Granger. They probably haven't checked in yet, Zach said. I'd like to leave a message. Have them call Zach as soon as they can. He thought about hiding his father's journal, but he was afraid someone might find it. He decided to keep it with him until he could get to his father. Chapter 20. Peter Short was disappointed when Zach didn't show up in the cafeteria for lunch. The school was buzzing with the news of the new chalkboard message, and he wanted to see Zach's reaction to the second card he had played early that morning in Miss Miller's room. Peter's third card was going to be a bluff card. He had been up half the night studying the journal, but he still had some doubts about who Zach really was. He would have to play the third card in person. His chance came after lunch. Zach was in no hurry to return to school. In fact, he thought about skipping the afternoon altogether to wait by the phone for his mother to call back. But after a while, sitting there by himself started to drive him crazy. He was half an hour late. He stopped in the office for a late slip, telling the secretary he had gone home and been there longer than he thought. She wrote out the slip, barely looking at him. Zach was grateful that Mrs. Pyle's office door was closed. He stopped at his locker to get his math book and decided to take another look at his dad's journal before going to class. He pulled it out of the backpack, the rubber band snapped, and all the loose pages spilled out over the freshly waxed floor. Great! He got down on his knees and hurriedly began gathering the pages. Did you drop these? Zach looked up. Peter Short was standing in front of him, holding a couple of loose pages. Zach stood up and grabbed them out of his hand. Peter laughed as Zach stuffed the pages into the tattered journal. Looks like you need a new journal, Jack, Peter said. Zach began to feel queasy. My name is Zach, not Jack. Peter stopped smiling. Time for the third card. Your name is Jack Osborne. And the fourth card. Your sister's name is Joanne Osborne. Jack closed his eyes in defeat. How did you get my journal? Peter's smile returned. The bluff had worked. Until that moment, he hadn't known for certain that Zach Granger was Jack Osborne. Zach had not written their old last name in the journal. The last name had come from a man looking for them, Hector Jones. What you should be asking me is, what am I going to do with your journal? What are you going to do with it? I haven't decided, Peter said. That depends on you. Who have you told about it? No one. Zach felt a flicker of hope. What do you want? Peter looked at the clock on the wall. I need to get back to class. I'll meet you in the park at 4, and we can discuss it. Zach stared at him. How about if I go to Mrs. Pyle and tell her you have it? Peter laughed. You're a terrible bluffer, Jack. If you tell her, I'll tell everyone in the school who you are. Peter walked away, then stopped and turned back for a second. Does Caitlin know your eyes aren't really blue? When Peter got to his class, he unfolded the loose journal page he had stuffed into his pocket before Zach saw him standing there. The sketch on the torn page looked a lot like Hector Jones. Zach knew he could not trust Peter, but if he could delay Peter long enough for his mother to get in touch with Uncle Don and Aunt Doris, the U.S. Marshals might have some way of keeping Peter's mouth shut. There was still hope. After school, Zach stopped by the custodian room. Your sister was amazing yesterday, Sam said. She's going to make a great Christine. Only if she changes her name to Christine in her next life, Zach thought. Yeah, she's pretty excited. Did they make it to Los Angeles today? I haven't heard from them yet. What time are you coming over to the Nevada? I should be there by dinner. Sam looked at Zach closely. You know, you don't look like a kid who's going up to the mountains with his girlfriend for the weekend. Is everything okay? Sure. I heard about the note on the chalkboard. Mrs. Pyle was convinced you were involved somehow. Well, she's wrong. I told her it didn't seem like something you would do. Are you sure there's nothing going on you'd like to talk about? Zach shook his head and left the room. When he got home, the first thing he did was call his mother's hotel. They still hadn't checked in. I'd like to leave another message, Zach said. If they haven't checked in by now, they're not checking in, the woman said. We're full. Are you sure this is the right hotel? It's the only number she gave me. Well, there are no Grangers here and none on the reservation list. They must have gone to another hotel. Zach hung up the phone and went to his mother's bedroom, hoping to find the number for Uncle Don and Aunt Doris. It wasn't there. The only thing for him to do was meet with Peter and see what he wanted. He packed a few things for his trip to the mountains and walked to the park across the street from the school. Peter was looking at his watch. You're late. Where's my journal? Peter reached into his backpack and pulled the journal out. Here you go, he said cheerfully and handed it to him. Zach was not expecting this. And our time is up. We will continue this tomorrow. Have a great day, guys. Bye.